This video is brought to you by Nebula. Today, Trump makes a shock call for the US to take over the Gaza Strip. Greenland calls an election, and Sweden suffers its worst ever mass shooting. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Wednesday, the 5th of February, 2025. In his latest expansionist declaration, Donald Trump said on Tuesday that the United States should, quote, take over the Gaza Strip, claiming it could be turned into the Riviera of the Middle East, and declining to rule out sending US troops to the Palestinian territory to make it happen. Trump made the comments at a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House, and it follows his proposal to permanently resettle Gaza's 2 million or so people in nearby countries, like Egypt and Jordan, a suggestion that Arab leaders as well as authorities in Gaza have steadfastly rejected. It's hard to state just how much this upends the established US position on Israel-Palestine. The US and most of the international community endorses a two-state solution, with an independent Palestinian state comprising the West Bank and Gaza. So, Trump suggesting the depopulation of Gaza and its ownership by the US represents a radical departure. Any forced displacement of the Palestinian population from Gaza would likely be a violation of international law, and some human rights advocates say it would amount to ethnic cleansing. For context, a large proportion of those in Gaza are already refugees and their descendants, people who were expelled or fled from what is now Israel. Trump said right now Gaza is a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. He said the US will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs. Asked who would live there, Trump said it would become a home to the world's people. At the press conference, Benjamin Netanyahu was not drawn into discussing it in detail, instead saying that Trump was thinking outside the box with fresh ideas, and was showing willingness to puncture conventional thinking. However, the Associated Press reported that Trump's proposal had been, quote, swiftly rejected and denounced by American allies and adversaries alike. Saudi Arabia, for example, a key US ally in the region, put out a sharply worded statement reiterating its, quote, absolute rejection of infringement on the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, whether through Israeli settlement policies, annexation of Palestinian lands, or efforts to displace the Palestinian people from their land. The Prime Minister of Greenland, Impeached, has proposed that a general election be held on March the 11th, amidst growing concerns over US President Donald Trump's interest in acquiring the Arctic island. The election is expected to focus on Greenland's aspirations for independence, the development of the island's fragile economy, and relations with Denmark and the US. Greenland's parliament, currently made up of the Green community of the People Party and the Social Democratic Siumut, unanimously approved Impeached's proposal. Despite the country's growing autonomy, including the right to declare independence, Denmark still has a significant role in Greenland's security and foreign policy. Both parties are in favour of independence, but the community of the People Party, in particular, advocates a cautious approach. Full independence should only be pursued when the country is less dependent on financial support. For context, Denmark's block grant to Greenland amounts to around €500 million a year. In a social media post, Impeached called for cooperation and unity ahead of the election, emphasising that Greenland is at a critical juncture in its history. A recent poll by Varian showed that a majority of Greenlanders would vote for independence if a referendum were held now. However, nearly half of respondents said they would not support independence if it negatively impacted their standard of living. In a bid to prevent outside influence, a law to ban foreign donations to political parties is expected to be approved by Greenland's parliament. The bill aims to safeguard the country's political integrity and prevent foreign powers, including the US, from exerting influence over Greenland's domestic affairs. Yesterday, the worst mass shooting in Swedish history unfolded after 11 people were killed, including the gunman at an adult education centre in Örebro. Officers were first called at around 12:30 p.m. local time. 6 people had been taken to the local university hospital, including 5 with gunshot wounds. 4 had undergone surgery, including 2 who are in a stable condition. The Education Centre offers primary and secondary educational classes for adults aged 20 and older, vocational training for people with intellectual disabilities, and Swedish language classes for immigrants. The investigation currently underway has identified the attacker as a 35-year-old unemployed man. Like many Swedes, he was licensed to hunt, and authorities believe he acted alone. Notably, the attacker is a relatively unknown figure, with no prior criminal convictions on his record, and no ties to organised crime groups. Moreover, police have so far found no indication that the shooter's actions were motivated by ideological or extremist views. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson called it the worst mass shooting in Swedish history, and said it's difficult to take in the extent of what has happened today. Darkness is being cast over Sweden tonight. The Vice President of the Philippines, Sara Duterte, has been impeached by the country's House of Representatives, setting her up for a trial in the Senate and escalating a bitter feud between her and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Sara Duterte, the daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte, has faced several impeachment complaints relating to alleged corruption, betraying the public trust, and an apparent death threat she made against the president last year. 215 out of 306 members of the House of Representatives voted for impeachment, far above the one-third threshold needed for it to pass. The 24-member Senate will serve as an impeachment court, although the timing could be difficult as campaigning for House and Senate elections in May begins soon. The powerful Duterte and Marco families teamed up ahead of the 2022 presidential election, with Sara Duterte becoming Marcos's running mate. However, the families have had an explosive fallout. One key difference, for example, is that President Marcos has pivoted the Philippines back towards the US, reversing the pro-China stance of Sara Duterte's father. With the presidential election of 2028 edging ever closer, the political dynasties are jockeying for the best position. Sara Duterte has been considered a possible candidate. However, if convicted by the Senate, she would be permanently barred from holding public office. He might have only been in office for a few weeks, but Trump has made a big impact already, as we've covered extensively. That's not all we have to say though, because there's a lot of weird and wild things we don't have time to cover in videos, from if Trump's becoming an imperial president, to America's wild history of territorial expansion, to questioning if the US is actually an oligarchy. All of these things could lead you to say, WTF USA, which is, appropriately, also the name of the series I'm literally telling you about right now. WTF USA takes a tongue-in-cheek look at the weirder side of US politics, unpacking what Trump's really up to and why Trump's kind of weird decisions could end up being incredibly impactful. WTF USA is released every other Friday only on Nebula, the streaming service we co-own with a bunch of your favourite creators. Those creators also make a ton of other exclusive Nebula content, including Tom Nichols' new documentary Boomers. In the feature-length documentary, Tom explores the wild truth that old people kind of run the world, unpacking why affordable housing, cheap education, living wages are slipping out of reach for younger generations, as well as questioning the questionable legacy of the baby boomers. It's not just original content either. You can also watch every normal TLDR video on Nebula ad-free, and in some instances before they land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, click our link in the description to get 40% off, which brings the price down to just $36 a year or $3 a month. That's a real steal considering all of the original content on the platform, and the fact that signing up using our link directly funds the channel and allows us to make more content going forward. So thanks for your support, and please do join us over on Nebula.